Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Congressional Western Caucus Permitting Forum. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague from the great state of Nevada, the Vice Chair of our Western Caucus, Mr. Mark Amodei. Thanks for being with me today, Mark. Congressman Amodei is here alongside our esteemed guest to help highlight a very exciting development in his home state of Nevada, the final permitting of the Thacker Pass Lithium Mine. Throughout this last month of March, Western Caucus members have been outlining the permitting challenges that our country faces and how these challenges impede us from making progress on critical infrastructure projects, on energy development, and so much more. I'm really proud to be able to host this forum to both dive into the onerous processes that these projects have had to endure, but also to discuss the fact that this important project demonstrates a critical opportunity for Nevada's communities and, frankly, for the entire country. I've learned that Humboldt County holds the largest known lithium deposit in the United States. And after undergoing many years of local, state, and federal permitting processes, it will be home to our nation's next large-scale lithium mine, the Thacker Pass. Western Caucus members have been strong advocates for a stable, reliable domestic supply of critical minerals, and this absolutely includes lithium. As you know, lithium is used in batteries for everyone's cell phones, for our laptops, and the ever more talked about electric vehicles, making it one of the most in-demand critical minerals that we need. And until now, only 1%. Get that number, 1% of what we need is mined domestically. As we continue to increase our utilization of clean energy technologies, this demand will only continue to grow. So the opening of Thacker Pass will help decrease our reliance on other countries and ensure that we have a secure domestic supply of lithium moving forward. But as we have seen in other areas of the country, permitting the new mines, well, let me just say it can be a bureaucratic nightmare. Despite the Biden administration's supposed priority of strengthening the critical mineral supplies, they continue to cancel, to stall, and to pull the permits for new mining projects that would help us accomplish this goal. We all know in the United States, we can mine the minerals we need more safely and more responsibly than anywhere in the world. And we should absolutely be celebrating these wins. I want to commend each of our panelists today for their really critical efforts to ensure the finalization of the permitting of this new mine. And I look forward to hearing how it will benefit both our national security and certainly Nevada's rural communities. Now, let me turn it over to my Vice Chair of the Western Caucus, Mr. Amodei, for some opening remarks and also to introduce our guests. So, Mr. Amodei, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the folks that from Nevada that have agreed to testify here, and I will get you guys on there lickety split. Our perspective is obviously from a Nevada perspective, whether it's hard rock, whether it's rare earth minerals, and all the things affiliated with that. I want to make a couple of points that I think are relevant whenever we talk about permitting. And that is, first and foremost, the culture that somehow minerals extraction is an evil thing that doesn't care about the environment. Nobody goes into business and nobody succeeds in this business by saying, I want dirty water, I want dirty air, and I want contaminated soil. Yet you are subjected to that when you go through the NEPA process. And by the way, the NEPA process, if it's used as it's laid out in the Code of Federal Regulations, is a fine thing. It's transparent, it requires due process, and it requires people to rely upon the science. Those are all good things. Things only kind of start heading off the tracks, if you will, when people try to basically take that and turn it into something that it wasn't meant to be. And in modern times when that happens, that's usually somebody who says, we want to kind of try to wait out the folks who are applying for permits. And we want to try to make it so that capital for these projects goes elsewhere. And Mr. Chairman, you made a great point when you look at what we're doing in terms of what our present mineral reserves are in, for instance, rare earths, and what we're basically accessing ourselves in a responsible manner. Lithium is the focus of some of this today, and appropriately so. I find it incredible that at a time when we have an administration that says, hey, we want more electric vehicles, electric this, electric that, battery technology requires rare earths and especially lithium for that. But at the same time, the help to those folks who are attempting to access those minerals in an environmentally responsible way is unapparent. Some of the recent initiatives by the administration saying, hey, we want to speed up mineral production and rare earths just within the last few days, Mr. Chairman, are interesting because they talk about operations, safety, all this good stuff, but the word missing from that piece of policy from the information is permitting. And so we will hear from the Thacker Pass folks here shortly, and Mr. Evans, who is the focus, the guy and the company in a lithium sense that's been working for a long time, and they're not across the finish line yet, although they're in good shape. But in this business, it's never over till it's over, and that includes the court stuff. But I'll leave Mr. Evans to that task. But as we sit here and talk about how important renewables are and how important electronic vehicles are and how batteries play a role in that, when we look at what's actually been done in terms of relief for companies like Lithium Nevada, and relief like companies that Debbie Strusacker from Women in Mining, one of the founders, whether it's precious metals, rare earths, whatever, it's just amazing to see that there is still this underlying culture of, if it's got to be mined in the U.S., it's a bad thing. And therefore, this culture chooses to rely upon foreign sources when, quite frankly, those foreign sources can't match the record in terms of what our domestic sources do in terms of environmental responsibility, in terms of responsible employment practices. Their employees make great money. They have great benefits. They aren't clogging up our criminal justice systems because they all get drug and alcohol tested as part of the safety program. And so you sit here and say, what the heck? Heck yeah, we want companies to do that sort of stuff. And yet for political agendas, we're trying to make it as difficult as possible, despite the fact that the environmental record for modern mining, whether it's precious metals, rare earths, or whatever, is incredible. So with that, I just want to say before we go into our first witness, which will be Dave Mendiola, who's the county manager of Humboldt County, it is amazing that there is a culture out there which completely ignores the reality of what these projects mean to an area and how responsible they really are in any sort of a NEPA sense, endangered species sense, or any of that stuff. So I think we'll start out for the local government perspective on what a project, a responsible project means in terms of, and not just Lithium Nevada, but other operators that are in Humboldt County. I'm going to go to Mr. Mendiola, who's the county manager, longtime Nevada roots and stuff like that. I'm going to say nice things about him, Mr. Chairman, and that's a hard thing to do for anybody who graduated from Boise State University. No offense to Mr. Simpson and the folks in famous potatoes country, but he's gotten me back plenty of times, and I assume will continue. So without further Boise State Broncos versus University of Nevada Wolfpack sparring or anything else like that, Thank you very much, David, for agreeing to do this, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it very much. First, I want to thank Congressman Newhouse and Amodei and the Congressional Western Caucus for their willingness to host this forum and to provide the opportunity for Humboldt County to weigh in on this important issue. As county manager in Humboldt County, Nevada, in the heart of gold country and soon to be lithium country, the communities of Winnemucca, Grass Valley, Orovada, Valmy, McDermott, and Denial are impacted each and every day by the mining industry. First and foremost, some may find it strange that Humboldt County does not have direct issues with the NEPA process. However, there are several key points that are critical to this discussion. First of all, cooperating agency status. It's critical for any NEPA planning or project level analysis. Sometimes it's difficult to navigate both NEPA deadlines and meet state of Nevada open meeting law requirements. So cooperating agency engagement is critical. Related to this point, while limiting the length of public comment period sounds like a means to streamlining NEPA, it can actually be counterproductive for local government. Meaningful engagement is time-consuming and expensive, but critical to positive outcomes. Where it becomes burdensome is in cases such as the Greater Sage Grouse Land Use Plan Amendment, where we are now in our third iteration. Specific to sage grouse, the county would rather see the 2020 plan be implemented by the BLM versus starting the process all over again. The NEPA process itself isn't as cumbersome or as complex as the appeals and legal challenges that often follow the final environmental impact statement. The equal access to justice laws that have encouraged litigation have been an issue. The federal agency, particularly the BLM, are so understaffed and to some degree inexperienced that any project that needs to move forward in a timely manner needs to pay for its own NEPA and baseline analysis. And also from a competitive standpoint in the global marketplace, US regulations can and do create a significant disadvantage for mining interests when exploring and permitting on US soil. Let me look at the other side here on the other end of the spectrum with respect to the burden on local communities and economic development. It is very difficult to juggle getting the infrastructure, i.e. your housing, schools, workforce, and education and services ready to handle the impact of a new or expanding mine when the process takes so long. Communities cannot afford not to plan and initiate projects. Yet they must do so without any additional revenue, realizing it all could fall apart at the last minute and no revenue will ever be produced. As an example, Humboldt County and the city of Winnemucca, through its economic development officer, county manager, and city manager, has spent the better part of 5 years recruiting developers and builders to the area in an effort to get ahead of the curve. While this has been a very successful effort, ultimately, the decision to invest in Humboldt County for the vital infrastructure to support these new opportunities and the employees came only after permits were approved. The effect is the same on small businesses as they gear up to provide services to the proposed mine with no return on investment for years, even decades. This has a domino effect of hardship for local businesses as they struggle to hold on, and takes away their economic opportunity in favor of larger businesses from outside the community that can sustain the cost of expansion ahead of future revenues. There's a tremendous burden on our federal agencies as well. The enormous amount of red tape keeps our federal employees, the BLM, Forest Service, et cetera, in a constant mountain of paperwork. This keeps them from meaningful interaction with the public and even traveling out to the lands that they oversee. The process promotes friction and frustration as the general public finds it nearly impossible to comprehend the process and endless documents. The result is often misinformed protest that could otherwise be avoided through a far simpler and transparent process. The uncertainty and setbacks of such a drawn-out process can also create a pallor of economic stagnation or worse for a community. Thus, a shorter process could be beneficial. However, there needs to be balance so that the concerns of the county and the impact on its citizens and the environment are carefully weighed. At the same time, once a time frame can be established from start to completion of the NEPA process, it would be beneficial to inform local and regional businesses so that they can plan to meet the expected growth. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Now I think we're going to go to Jonathan Evans, who is the president and CEO of Lithium Americas Corporation, who presently, these folks have operations going on or permitting operations in Argentina and Nevada. So I think it would be interesting to hear that perspective in terms of what's going on in another jurisdiction outside the country, and what your experience has been, Jonathan, and also where you're at with the Thacker Pass process in terms of what Lithium America's operations are there. So with that, Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you all for including me on this panel. I'm pleased to join you today and happy you're looking at ways to speed up production of critical minerals like lithium. Unfortunately, the U.S. is behind where we need to be when it comes to providing the essential materials necessary to meet domestic demand, ensure domestic security, and deliver quality job creation, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Together, we can work to ensure the U.S. dramatically improves its ability to fulfill demand for lithium and reduce our dependence on foreign sources like China, which currently controls over 60% of the global lithium supply chain. My company, Lithium Americas and Lithium Nevada, is currently developing Thacker Pass, which is a lithium project in Humboldt County in northern Nevada. It's the most advanced and largest lithium development project in the United States. It's actually the third largest lithium deposit in the world. There's about 120 million tons of lithium, and we haven't even discovered all of it yet. We spent more than a decade on discovery, analysis, engagement, permitting, and design to ensure we're doing this right. We've acquired all of our major permits and are working on construction financing. It's our goal to begin construction by this time next year. Build out will take a couple of years. It's about 2 or 3 years, but once we're up and fully running, our project will produce enough high-grade lithium chemicals to supply 1.5 million electric vehicles with batteries every year. It's more than 10 times as much lithium chemicals as are currently produced in the United States today. Building a project like ours in today's regulatory environment takes time, a lot of it. Together, we can make the process go faster by applying more resources to all the required steps I mentioned. And we can do it in a way that doesn't compromise exceptional environmental stewardship and meaningful benefits to local communities. Thacker Pass is a project we can all be proud of as Nevadans and as Americans. We're striving to be carbon neutral and are on our way to producing 45 megawatts of carbon-free power on site by capturing heat generated through our chemical reaction for our reagent plant. Additionally, our water use is low, equivalent to a few alfalfa pivots. Our air emissions are also low, on par with the emissions of a Ford Super Duty truck. Most notably, we're keeping our footprint low while producing, once at full scale, 80,000 tons of lithium carbonate per year. To put in that perspective, U.S. production of lithium minerals is around 4,000 or 5,000 tons a year today. We are also focused on making sure that the surrounding communities share in the success of this project. We're creating 300 exceptional full-time jobs, generating billions in taxes over the project life, and working with local communities in the nearby tribe to carefully gather feedback, build consensus, and identify additional areas we can invest to make a difference. While we'll not make a major difference in the current domestic production landscape, Thacker Pass is not enough to make the U.S. self-sufficient. We're years away from that. Our 80,000 tons per year in production will make us one of the largest producers on the planet, but it's expected the U.S. will need as much as 500,000 tons by 2040. I commend you for recognizing the need for more projects like Thacker Pass, and I look forward to rolling up my sleeves to working with you on specific improvements to the current process. In short, there's a great potential to accelerate the process by increasing access for mineral discovery. You have the ability to help companies like mine by investing in the communities near these projects. This support of the projects at the local level will help us move forward, ensuring that nearby areas see improvements in their schools, roads, and healthcare to support the workforce, their families, and those who feed into the local economy. As is the case with most traditional industries, the workforce required to build and run the projects is retiring. There's a huge opportunity with workforce development incentives to train the next generation of engineers, geologists, equipment operators, biologists, and more. Construction capital is another area where I hope we can work together. Our project is in the process to receive a Department of Energy loan through the Loan Program Office. This is a game changer for us, and I would encourage you to continue prioritizing access to the Department of Energy financing for these projects that align closely with the U.S. policy goals. And of course, accelerating permitting without compromising environmental review is both possible and necessary. For example, under the current process, the overseeing agency writes the EIS, or they hire a contractor to write it at the company's expense. We could meaningfully reduce timelines if we were allowed applicants themselves to write the draft EIS for a thorough review by the overseeing agency. The way it is already done with environmental assessments. This, along with similar changes, would relieve pressure on understaffed agencies like the BLM and place responsibility of staying on schedule with the applicant. There are areas where things are changing for the better. The Nevada BLM has continued limiting the pages of EIS. Ours was limited to 150 pages. We're pleased to see the continuation of sensible reforms by the Nevada BLM and hope these changes could be applied nationally. We believe the greater limitations can also be introduced when it comes to the appeals process. We fully respect the public's right to participate in our judicial system, but too often appeals are used to run the clock and burn through an applicant's resources. These delays serve as a disincentive to building projects in the United States, and it's something that needs congressional attention. Thank you again for the invite here today. It's important that we work together because we have a long way to go to provide a secure domestic supply of lithium and other critical minerals that we depend on. I'm at your service to assist however I can.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that testimony and the fact that it's crisp, hard-hitting, a lot of good facts. Batting cleanup is Debbie Strusacker. She is one of the founders of the Women's Mining Coalition, currently serves on the coalition's board of directors, certified professional geologist with the American Institute of Professional Geology. Over 30 years of, can I say over 30 years, Debbie, is that okay? Since that'll say you've been doing it for a while, but we'll just move forward. I didn't say how old Mendiola was. I'm sure it's older than you are. Over 30 years of hands-on experience with the environmental and public and laws regulations pertaining to mineral exploration and mine development. She has provided environmental and permitting consultant to numerous mining companies. And with that, Debbie Strusacker, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Congressman Amodei and Chairman Newhouse. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this roundtable discussion today, and it's a true pleasure to share the dais with Mr. Evans and Mr. Mendiola. As we've heard, the protracted permitting process is standing in the way of exploring for and producing critical minerals. It's also standing in the way of developing renewable energy projects in general, building new infrastructure, including transmission lines needed to support nationwide electrification. So, as we've heard, permitting is a real problem. You probably all remember the shovel-ready infrastructure projects and construction jobs that were touted in the 2009 stimulus bill. Well, it turns out there were very few shovel-ready projects, and that was because of permitting roadblocks. And in fact, in a 2010 New York Times interview, President Obama actually admitted that there is no such thing as a shovel-ready project, and that's because of permitting delays. I'm afraid that history is about to repeat itself with the infrastructure projects in the recently enacted bipartisan infrastructure law and in President Biden's announcement last week that he is invoking the Defense Production Act to increase domestic critical minerals production. Well, that's a great step forward, but unless permitting barriers are removed, Americans are going to find out that it is going to be really difficult to increase domestic critical mineral production or build clean energy projects in general. As we've heard, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, is the main reason it takes so long to explore for and develop minerals, or actually to do anything else that requires a federal permit. So whether it's building a transmission facility, a pipeline, or a clean energy project, NEPA is always involved. And as Congressman Amodei said, NEPA is actually a good thing because it provides an opportunity for federal agencies to take a really close look at environmental impacts, disclose those impacts to the public, seek public input on how projects can be improved. But there's a problem with NEPA, and I think Mr. Mendiola and Mr. Evans both alluded to this. The delays in NEPA are mainly due to NGO challenges to federal agencies' NEPA decisions. These appeals and litigations are a source of costly and time-consuming delays. That is truly burdening federal agencies and slowing down many projects. And I would like to echo Mr. Evans' comments about the caliber of BLM and other federal agencies that are charged with putting together the NEPA documents. They are very good at what they do. They are often understaffed, and that can create problems, but they are taking a good, close, hard look at the environmental impacts that are associated with developing mineral projects or other kinds of projects on federal land. And Chairman Newhouse, you mentioned earlier in your opening remarks that we have the ability, thanks to our environmental laws here in the US, we have the cleanest and safest mines in the world. And it's important to understand that the reason we have very environmentally responsible and safe mines is not because of NEPA. NEPA is kind of a paper tiger in reality. It's a procedural law, and it's a law that produces documents, again, as I mentioned earlier, to disclose impacts and to seek feedback. But environmental protection measures aren't in NEPA per se. They are derived from the body of federal and state environmental protection laws like the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act, or in the case of mining, also surface management acts that require reclamation and financial assurance. That's where we are assured that projects, including critical mineral projects, are the cleanest and safest projects of any in the world. So despite the fact that President Biden and his administration are really focusing on the need for critical minerals, and it's truly terrific that people are realizing there's an indispensable nexus between critical minerals and achieving the country's clean energy objectives and strengthening our supply chains. But unfortunately, the administration hasn't yet taken the necessary steps to address the permitting roadblocks that are standing in the way of timely development of the critical minerals that are the underpinning of clean energy projects. So rather than directing the secretaries of the Interior and Secretary of Agriculture to start expediting critical mineral projects, the administration has regrettably come out with other messages, sending kind of mixed signals about trying to change the mining law to add new duplicative regulatory requirements and put additional lands off limits to mining. If these proposals were enacted, it would reduce mineral exploration and development. It would actually increase our reliance on foreign minerals, and ultimately will reduce and eliminate or thwart the ability of the country to meet our national objectives to increase clean energy and to strengthen supply chains. There's at least one top-level administration official who has linked our reliance on critical minerals to permitting delays, and that's U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. Last month, in her remarks at the SARA Clean Energy Conference, she basically said that the administration needs to focus on a whole of government effort to remove some of the bureaucratic and time-consuming delays for permitting in order to expedite development of clean energy projects and clean energy mineral projects as well. So I guess in closing, I'd like to stress that we can streamline permitting and not in any way sacrifice any measure of environmental protection. And that's because we could streamline NEPA, but all of the environmental protection laws that require permits and monitoring and reporting and strict enforcement of environmental protection standards, that's what really provides the environmental protection. So we need to look at ways to speed up the process so we can get to those permits that actually protect the environment. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'll look forward to our upcoming dialogue.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Dave, John, Debra, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us today and talk about some of the not only the benefits of the Thacker Pass Lithium Mine, but also some of the challenges that we are experiencing in these industries and getting these kinds of projects online. So thank you very much for that. We both of us have some questions I think we'd like to pose to you. And as chairman, I'm going to yield to Mr. Amodei to let Mark go first. So, and then I'll have a couple questions when he's done. So Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. First of all, before I go into the questions, it's obvious to those of us who live it, but just for those folks listening, the reason federal permitting is so important, especially in the state that I represent, is because the federal government owns about 85% of the state. So, you know, I think Ms. Strusacker alluded to it. It's like anything you want to do in terms of in Nevada, whether it's mining, a transmission line, a roadway, a right-of-way for water line or something else like that, utilities, you name it, it's like you have to get a federal permit. And so while not all of it's the Bureau of Land Management, a very large portion of that ownership is the Bureau of Land Management that it administers through its district offices in Winnemucca, Elko, Ely, Carson City, Las Vegas, for those different districts around them. There's a couple that seep in from the edges in northwestern Nevada and that sort of stuff. So you're like, well, why do you care? And blah, blah, blah. It's like, because quite literally in much of the West and in your part of Washington state as well, Mr. Chairman, it's like the federal government is the landowner. So you have to go to them for these things. All fine and good. Let me ask Dave Mendiola this question. Dave, do you have any thoughts on when you talk about cooperating agency? We're in the middle of a fight with a different federal agency that wants to do a public land withdrawal in Nye County. That's about 34 square miles, and it's not BLM. As a matter of fact, it's NASA. They don't want to make the county, the local county that the valley's located in, a cooperating agency. It's like, wow, they've got planning and zoning jurisdiction. There is no such thing as federal planning and zoning jurisdiction. Do you have any thoughts on whether it would help to provide an automatic cooperating agency status for things like this to the local entity that has planning and zoning jurisdiction?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Congressman. I absolutely agree. I think automated entry into the cooperating agency status is critical. And again, in most of our experiences, they have allowed us in and in the local office, and it's been very good. As a matter of fact, with respect to the lithium Thacker Pass project, we were part of that cooperating agency, and it was really an eye-opener for us to be able to sit in on that and talk about the different investigations that were done, the cultural studies, et cetera, and to be able to hear the detail on that early on. And while I'm not an engineer or a geologist or anything like that, it really does open your eyes. So I think cooperating agency status is, it doesn't make any sense to exclude those counties that are directly impacted by that. And doing so just suggests to me that there's more behind the story than is being told, which again goes completely against everything that we try to strive for in government, which is, we always hear the word transparency. It kind of gets old after a while, but when the story you tell, with NASA, it's mind-boggling to me why you would hold somebody out of a conversation who is the impact. That's like you coming in and telling me how I'm going to take care of my yard and what my house is going to look like, and without any input at all. So I agree with you. I think that's imperative that happen in every case.
Thanks, David. I'll make sure and give you the phone number of the public lands person at NASA in case you have some extra time someday. You can give them a little yell and share some of that Boise State Bronco wisdom with them, okay? Great. John, so tell us where you folks are at in terms of your permitting process. Obviously, with respect to Thacker Pass, I know you're most of the way down the road. You can't say mission accomplished yet, but then also what the possibilities are once BLM does their record of decision in terms of the litigation. If you could just kind of hit the high points, that'd be great.
Sure. We received our final state permits about 6 weeks ago. So that was a big milestone, and worked closely with the state regulators on that, and those were issued. Really, the only thing that remains is the appeal. And I hit on that in my testimony a little bit, that I think appeals need to be really brought promptly, like within a month or two of the record of decision. And as you know as well, we've had interveners that have tried to join. In one case, a group calling themselves a tribe that wasn't really a tribe, a colony to the north that tried to join a year later. And as the government has gone through, the federal court's gone through and through its discovery process, the confidential work that's been done with the tribal governments has come out, where you have 15 years of history in some cases. And in one of the areas, or one of the tribes that has been part of the appeal, specifically put a map out that they had no interest in the area during the last consultation that the government had done with them even before this project. We'll be ready to get into early works construction in the second half of this year. And I'm happy to say, as of Friday as well, we started with the Department of Energy and the Loan Program Office in a pre-draft process. We were informed by Friday that they have given us now the go-ahead to formally apply. You have to be asked by the Department of Energy after they do their due diligence. And I'll give a lot of credit to Jigar Shah, who's come from the private sector running that office. They are very, very keen to work with us, and that process, he said, can go as quick as 4 months. And we're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars here. They want to loan it. One of the issues that we have in this country as well is a lack of private sector involvement, which a lot of the reasons are, or private sector investment, a lot of the reasons are exactly what you in the commission here has talked about today, fear from wanting to get involved. I mean, the industry that we're in lithium, I'm sold out the day I start, and I'm sold out for the next decade. We have serious interest from American-based OEMs. So Ford, General Motors, their suppliers as well. They want to have a China-free supply chain. Even the Korean and Japanese battery manufacturers, I've been told directly, they are putting operations here in the United States. They want to have a source of lithium, actually graphite as well, and other critical minerals, so that these supply chains here are very much like they are for internal combustion engine vehicles that we have today. The whole ecosystem is built around these companies and bringing high-paying jobs to the states that they're in. So we're excited. I'm not worried about funding for this. The thing that remains, and it's always been the hurdle, is the last remaining hurdle is the appeal. And Judge Du has finally laid down a very firm schedule, and I think has now seen the kind of stuff that was brought in here to slow things down, and we hope to get this resolved this summer, because after that we can finally move forward. And as I said before, this is a massive deposit. It goes all the way up into the state of Oregon. We don't hold the claims north of the Nevada border. There's 2 lithium companies up there now that are in exploration stage. I had a call from Senator Wyden's office now asking about lithium development in the state of Oregon. So, this is a national issue, has bipartisan support, which I'm happy to see. And truly, I was happy, and I give a lot of credit to you all in Washington pushing the Defense Production Act. This is critical to our national and economic security. The industries are going to change over the next 10 years. All that processing expertise that folks talk about, only the Chinese know how to do, we invented it all here. Lithium-ion battery was invented in Exxon Labs in Texas. And the lithium chemicals that we're dealing with and talking about here today, lithium hydroxide you hear a lot about, that was made in mass when we were developing the hydrogen bomb back in the 60s in the US. So we just gave it away. We can get it all back. We have better resources here than in China. And we have, between the US and actually Canada, our friendly neighbor in the north, we can become a powerhouse in this and be virtually self-sufficient, like we can be in oil and gas when we want to be.
And I want to also mention that, in my opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, I talked about what modern mining is really about in terms of respecting the resources, respecting their human resources, respecting cultural resources, and that it's possible to actually extract, whether it's strategic and critical minerals or precious, all that stuff in an environmentally responsible manner, but we still fight the cliches of the past and that are just outright false. When you look at what Lithium Americas has done, just as a case study, not that they're the only ones, but you look at it in terms of here's the issues, whether it's sage hen, whether it's cultural resources, whether it's what do you do in a resource sense, the whole 9 yards, interacting with tribal folks and all that. Basically, when an issue's come up, they've dealt with it head on, they've been transparent, and they're not different than the other mining folks that are in the business in a modern sense now. So thank you, Jonathan, for what you folks have done, how you've approached these issues in Nevada, and quite frankly, we're lucky to have you on board and keep going and doing great things. With that, Debbie Strusacker, we have all talked about, you know what that old saying, when you got the facts, you argue the facts. When you got the law, you argue the law. And when you don't have either one, you just argue. And so there are holes in the permitting process that allow people to just argue and obfuscate and you know, try to wait out the capital and things like that. So if you were given 2 wishes for the permitting process, Debbie, in terms of saying, listen, if there's an issue, let's go ahead and get that out there, kick it around, do that deal, figure out what the solutions are and move on. And by the way, if you can't solve it, then I think we all agree. It's like, well, guess what? If there's an issue that comes up that can't be solved, then maybe the answer is no. But you know, you and people like you and other folks that have been on this call and come before and will come after you are pretty innovative folks for solving issues. So if you had 2, Debbie, which 2 would you pick to say, here's the deal, whether it's NEPA or whatever else, there you go. You're the head person for 10 minutes, and what you say goes. Go get them, Tiger.
Thank you, Congressman. Well, actually, my first priority is something that Mr. Mendiola mentioned, which is I would ask Congress to amend the Equal Access to Justice Act to limit or even eliminate its application to NEPA and Administrative Procedure Act matters. Right now, NGOs, I mean, they are complete experts at weaponizing NEPA and initiating challenging federal agencies' decisions through appeals and litigation like that Mr. Evans has described as affecting the Thacker Pass project. And they do it because they can. And they do it because Equal Access to Justice Act, or EJA, makes it a profit center for them to do that. Because if they prevail, then they win their attorney's fees. So I would change that law to make it so that if you want to file an appeal or litigate an agency's NEPA decision, that you have to have more skin in the game besides just pushing send on your email to file the appeal or the litigation. I think, and you know, we've all agreed it's good to have transparency in the process, and you know, Mr. Evans said it's good to have given people a voice, but that voice needs to be reasonable, and it needs to be something that is controlled within a time frame, and not do it just because it makes your particular group look good and help you raise funds to keep your NGO alive. So again, changes to EJA. I think the second thing that I would like to do would be to increase agency staffing, because especially in Nevada, which is ground central for mineral development, the state of Nevada is the largest producer of valuable minerals on public lands of any state in the country. And that's because of our gold mining industry, and it's about to become additive with our lithium mining agency. And we simply don't have enough people working for the BLM to be able to do the work they need to do to respond to the demand upon them, and it is considerable, from mineral projects and other projects. I mean, if you look, particularly if you drill down into the, there are two specific district offices of the BLM in Nevada. One is in Winnemucca, so Humboldt County. The other is in Battle Mountain, which covers a large part of that part of Nevada extending down into Nye County. The bulk of Nevada's mineral projects are focused in those two BLM districts. And they are doing the best they can with the resources they have, but they just do not have enough resources to be able to keep all the balls in the air and get them done as quickly as possible. So they need more people. And in order to attract more people, they need to be able to pay them better. They need to be able to attract talent by having salaries that are competitive with the private sector for geologists and biologists and hydrologists and NEPA specialists and all of the expertise that the agencies must bring to bear when they develop a NEPA document. So they are just spread too thin due to lack of resources. So those would be my two key wishes.
Thank you, all three of you. I appreciate it. I think it's been pretty thought-provoking. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield back to you for your questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Amodei, and thank you all for your great responses. So first I'll start with Mr. Mendiola. You know, some of the things I've learned about the Lithium Americas company and what John has told us today, they have made considerable investments, I think, in surrounding areas to some of their projects currently, and I think they plan to continue to do that in order to help meet some of the challenges that you were talking about, Dave, the labor needs and the local infrastructure. So, Mr. Mendiola, could you talk about maybe some of the economic development and workforce opportunities that you see coming to the region, and a little bit about how a long-lasting mine like this, what it could mean for more established and long-term community investments?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it. Yes, so I've been working with Lithium Nevada for approximately 5 years. Prior to that, when it was Western Lithium, they came on my radar when I was first appointed to county manager back in late 2014. But as we had mentioned earlier, all of the individuals have suggested that it's been around a long time. There's been a lot of effort put into exploration, into trying to mitigate all the impacts to the area. But what I will say about my experience with Lithium Nevada is it's just been delightful. I was in the private sector for 27 years, and so I do have a little different perspective walking into this office. And what I found is they do truly understand the nexus between government and the private sector and how they can work together. And with respect to Humboldt County, they've kept me in the loop the entire time as to what their process was, how important it was for them to be a member of the community and a member of that community that not just exists, but also is seen as a major company that can do good in their community, and not just from the standpoint of providing, good jobs with good wages and benefits and those types of things, but also can be more involved in the community to make it a great place for all families to live, whether they're related to the mine or not. And, we've had such a great experience here in Northern Nevada with the mining industry. And lithium fits right into that almost perfectly. But one of the things it does for us, it diversifies our workforce. So they've been a key part in looking at the ways that we can better educate our children here, both internal to Nevada as well as individuals. As we know, they'll come from the outside as well. We do not have the labor force to fill all those positions here in Nevada. But the important thing is they've already begun that. 2 years ago, we began a process called Build Nevada. and working with the mining interests to identify what kind of an education do we need to provide for our kids, those coming out of high school, because, you know, being a rural county, we do have that issue of kids want to go on to college, they go, and a lot of times they don't come back. And so that can really hurt a community, but we've really made a concentrated effort to make sure those kids understand that, yeah, you go ahead and go off to school and get that degree that's going to help you in the long run, but then come back home, because this mining industry has changed so much over the years. It's a very high-tech industry. So I think what we're finding, the young people are very interested in that. And lithium's been right at the front of that. I'm trying to make an effort. And I want to share one story with you very quickly. While they were doing surveys with a third-party company that was helping the Thacker Pass Concerned Citizens group that was working with lithium, they did have some interviews with all the rural areas in Nevada up near where the mine site is. And one family talked about how excited they were for this opportunity, as their children had already gone off to college to get degrees in engineering and geology and some different areas. They knew that those kids would never come back, or if they did, they would never be able to use that degree. But now with people like Nevada Lithium and our other mining interests, they can come back home now. They can continue to be part of that family ranch farm. And so it's very exciting for them. So it'll keep the family farms alive and things like that, because they're losing their talent. But now lithium's been fantastic. You know, Tim Crowley and Maria Anderson here locally have just been outstanding. You know, Jonathan and Alexi, I can't say enough about their transparency, which I talked about, and also their desire to be a great positive impact on our community.
Great. Exciting things in store for your community, and we're happy to hear that. Mr. Evans, I wanted to ask you if you could help us understand some of the challenges that you face or maybe aware of as you work in other countries compared to the United States. You mentioned that you have presence in several other countries, and maybe you're familiar with some of the countries maybe where you don't have a presence in, and some of the permitting timelines, the environmental goals that other countries have and have set. I know some of our mining competitors are very environmentally conscious, as similar to we are in the United States. Is a longer permitting time necessarily equate to a better environmental outcome? Could you just share with us some of those comparisons with others?
Yeah, thanks, Congressman. And I think it's quality over quantity. And if you look at other countries, even Canada or Australia, we have experience in Argentina as well. The permitting process tends to be much more succinct with defined beginnings and ends, where you get an answer either way, whether it's yes or no. You tend to have a lot of state or provincial support, and a lot of the ownership is more at the state or provincial level versus at the federal level. Federal level gives guidelines in alignment in policies, say water management policies in Argentina, but the jurisdiction of those in the application is done within those guidelines at the provincial level, or would be the state level in the US. So it tends to go a lot quicker than it does. I think in Canada, permitting timelines tend to be 2 or 3 years from beginning to end, versus here, I think we target that in the US, but when you get in the appeal process could take longer than the actual NEPA process at the end of the day, because we don't have any limits on that. So it helps get capital investment and international operators to want to move offshore. In the case of Argentina, it's actually a difficult environment from an economic standpoint, in that they have capital controls and they have inflation issues. But even with all of that, you see a flood of investment coming into that country for lithium and also copper and nickel now, versus the United States, where we're blessed with a lot of those resources as well. But there's a real fear by the multinationals, along with development companies like my own, where the challenge we have is funding. So we're on our own. We've had to go out and raise our own money in the US market We've invested over $120 million in developing Thacker Pass. We are just about to open, I think we'll be amongst the largest lithium technical development laboratories in the US, at least from a private standpoint, in Reno next month. But it's all self-funded, where in other countries it tends to be much more hand in hand because they see the long-term economic development. And it's the same situation here where up in Humboldt County, as Dave said, it tends to be rural areas where economic development is welcome. And that's that type of mindset is what the state takes and where the province takes. And that's what the federal government in these countries actually endorses as well, because it helps them where they don't have to send so many tax dollars from one state to the next. They can generate their own tax dollars and self-fund their own development. So it's a vast difference, and that's why you've seen this lopsided development in, say, Australia or Argentina versus the United States, where in reality the industry left here about 30 or 40 years ago and hasn't come back.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. Ms. Strusacker, I hope I pronounced that correctly. As I mentioned earlier, the Western Caucus, we used the month of March to focus on permitting. And you're an experienced leader in this industry. I wondered if you could hit on some of the challenges companies face when they try to open a mine, or some of the barriers they face along the way, even once the mine is permitted. I think this is correct. I understand that as in the early 80s, we had nearly 1,000 mines operating in this country. Now I think we're down to less than a third of that, which is quite remarkable when you think about the needs that moving forward for a growing population and technology. Could you speak to the some of the impacts that the regulatory side of things has had and have placed on the industry? Is that a contributing factor to the change in the numbers? Just like to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Chairman Newhouse. Yes, I think concerns about the risks associated with permitting here in the US has been one of the key factors that has led to that really dramatic decline in the number of metal mines that you mentioned, from nearly 1,000 in the early 1980s to just less than 300 today. And that's shocking. And that translates into an enormous increase in our reliance on foreign minerals for basically everything that we do. So the permitting process has had, and the uncertainties about it, has had an insidious and widespread influence on the status of the domestic mining industry. Because as Mr. Evans was saying, small companies require investment capital in order to explore for minerals and develop and build mines. And investors are very wise, and they want to choose jurisdictions where they have more certainty, or the most certainty, that the monies that they invest into company XYZ, that company will be able to get the permitting, the operating permits it needs in a timely fashion so that their investment can bear fruit. And so the uncertainty with the process and the length of the process has really hollowed out the domestic mining industry right now. And I think, again, it's really important to recognize that we have the most comprehensive, stringent environmental protection laws in the world. And we have the ability to develop mines that are the most environmentally sensitive and responsible mines that look at all aspects of the environment, as we're required to do in securing permits for a mine. But the process has just dragged us down. And so we have our neighbor to the north in Canada, very similar environmental concerns and very similar level of commitment to ensuring that mines developed in Canada are clean and safe, but their process works so much better. So again, I mean, the real message that I hope to emphasize here is that we need to allow that process to work in a much faster way. And again, doing whatever you can to rein in the frequency and the length of appeals and litigation, I think, is key to that. Recognizing that the outcome of an agency's decision here in the US, whether a mine can meet the very stringent environmental protection standards that are embedded in federal and state regulations, that's the crux of the decision. And we need to be able to get to that decision as quickly as possible. And, agencies do a very good job at taking a close look at projects and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and the burden of proof is on the applicant to prove that they can meet all of the environmental, regulatory, and statutory requirements. And if a project can meet that, they need to be granted a permit, and they need to be granted a permit with some certainty and within a time frame that works for them and their investors. And so, again, we can capitalize on the fine regulatory framework that we already have, but we need to address the appeals and litigation component of the current permitting process.
Well said. Thank you. And thank you all. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate it very much. Mr. Amodei, I'm going to ask you, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to leave before we finish up today?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity, but I think that would just dilute what these three outstanding witnesses have said. I will just take a bow for the guy who said, these three might be a good three folks to hear from and be smart enough to stay out of the way from what they said. So thank you, and I yield back.
Yeah, it's great. You're a great example. All of us should be able to follow. Well, let me just say thanks again. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all of you on your work. It truly is something to celebrate to get this project as close to the finish line as we are. You're all an example of true collaboration, innovation, and I think, unfortunately, as you've all made the point, patience. And that's what this current industry has to endure in order to get the critical mineral supplies that we need. And I hope everybody watching today recognizes how significant that this new lithium mine is going to be for the United States and what it means for our future going forward. And I think that we can all join you in celebrating your success, and we certainly look forward to supporting your efforts moving forward. And hopefully we can meet like this to celebrate other successful conclusions to mining processes very soon. So thank you all for being with us today. Thank you to those of you that are watching and listening for being a very important part of another Western Caucus permitting forum. Thank you all.